Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's enrichment session. My name is Joanne, the Manager of Learning Support at ACCA, and together with me is my colleague, Brian. Now, the theme of today's enrichment session is one final push to pass. Now, what does it mean? Your exam is next week, Tuesday, so we want you to perfectly gear up yourself for the final push, and ACCA and our ACCA expert tutor, Sean, is here to guide and help you with your final preparation for the paper. Now, before I hand over to Sean, I'd just like to give a quick cover on the housekeeping item. Now, if you have any questions during the session, please use the Zoom control panel chat box at the bottom of the screen and select to send to all panelists and attendees so that others could see your comments. And we will aim to answer your questions during the session. Now, without further ado, I will now pass the session to Sean. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Joanne. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I do.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 6:30 in the morning in London. I think it's 2:30 in the afternoon in KL. Welcome and well done for making the time to make your exam journey more successful. My name is Sean Purcell. And the whole point of me being here today is make sure you pass the exam. If you know nothing about me, to give you a little bit of a background, I've been involved in teaching ACCA students for over 25 years. I've worked very closely with the examining team for over 20 years. And in terms of, I'm a founder of the organization, which is now Kaplan in the UK. What else? I'm the current UK PQ Lecturer of the Year, and I've been runner-up for that on a couple of occasions as well. And as well as talking to students about SBL and tutors, to be honest, not just students. I'm trying to help tutors teach it better. I also work as a management consultant, helping them develop finance business partnering competencies so that people can future-proof their career. And I've done some of that in Malaysia actually as well. So the objective of today, we've got 7 days, and the objective is you are fully clear on what you need to do on your exam. And in order that I know you are fully clear, I want you to ask as many questions as you want. And there's a chat box there. I've Jamie from Kuala Lumpur, good afternoon. And I've got my Sarah, good afternoon as well. So just use that chat box. Just get used to using the chat box, because today is about you making sure you're comfortable, you're confident. So let me see who can type in the chat box. I've got Jamie and I've got my Sarah. I know there's quite a few people here, but just get comfortable with using it, and let me give me your name and let me know where you're from. So it's not the question and answers, it's the chat. Jacqueline, good morning. And any specific part of Malaysia, Jacqueline? KL, so Wu Wen, good morning. Amir, good morning. Aisha, good morning. Whoa, we're coming in now. So Aisha's from Kuching. We've got Hannes from Banji and Selangor. Elila, KL, Fahana, Sia, Selangor, Jingying, Selangor as well. Jacqueline, good morning. XDD, Jacqueline's from Selangor, Malaysia. XDD, what's XDD? Noor's from Kuching. I've never been to Kuching, I don't think. Siv, Nafa, Akmal, Sabrina, Kent, Mun, Yong, Nurzela, Lim, Felest, Jiva, Shazwina from Sunway, that's not very far away. Lozi Wen, hello. Joan from Penang, good morning. Chloe from Selangor. Cheng Wei from PJ. Felicia from Sabah. Nazran from Someway. Noor, good morning. Nadzira from Johor. Chua from Penang. Tiru. Mohammed Fazril from KL. Eza. Izatul from Selangor. Okay. So laughing out loud in letter ha ha ha. I did not know that, Jacqueline. So thank you for that. Ling, good morning. Ryan, do change your chat option from to all panelists. Okay, that's why we do this. I was reading them so quickly, Ryan. I didn't actually I didn't see the difference. So yeah, so change your chat to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see it. So I think most people did that, but just check you did do it to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see you writing. So fantastic. Also, in terms of my background, I've been to Malaysia more times than I can remember. Yep. I actually set one of the first accountancy tuition colleges up in Malaysia on Jalan Pudu. It was called Emil Wolf. It was opposite, if you know KL, it was opposite the Swiss Garden Hotel on Jalan Pudu. Long time ago, that was back in the 90s. I also worked on the MARA program for Malaysian accountancy students in the UK. So the point I'm making, I know a lot about Malaysia. In fact, this is my first memory of Malaysia. You probably don't even know what these things are, but these are the famous Bas Minis. And when I first came to Malaysia, the only shopping center that existed was Lot 10. No Petronas Towers, no rain covers on Jalan Petaling. Actually, I love coming to Malaysia, and it's nice to talk to you online, but I'd much rather be in your great country, eating your great food. But hey, one day soon, eh? So use that chat panel a lot. So Jacqueline didn't know we had Bink Bus. No, that's what it used to be. And there used to be plumes of smoke coming out of the back of them. They used to have really loud music on some of them. They had big speakers inside of the bus. The drivers were all a bit crazy. You can see a guy hanging out. The driver just used to hang out onto those bars on the side. I do. I love Malaysia. I've traveled all around it. In fact, I traveled all around Malaysia on a bus, like a little, not a coach, a local bus. Went all around everywhere. All the way up the East Coast, all the way down the West Coast, Pulau Perhentian, all over the place. So yes, Shazwina wasn't even born. Yes, well, that's fine, Shazwina. I am older than I look, I hope. Alrighty, so that's great. The first thing I just wanted to do, as we are quite close to the exams, I want to launch a poll. Yep. And I just want to ask you something about how you're feeling today. So we've got a poll up on your screen. You should be seeing it come up on your screen. Let me know if it's not on your screen. I think it is. We're starting to vote. I'm going to run it for about 30 seconds. Another 10 seconds. Couple more to do the poll. Okay, I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So how are we feeling today? Let me share the results with you. I'm pleased to see that nearly 3/4 of you are slightly stressed, but looking forward to today's session. Yeah, now that's a good thing, because for us to perform well in exams and for us to concentrate and all the rest of it, having a little bit of stress is a good thing. It makes us more alert, it makes us more focused. So for most of you to say that, that's fantastic. However, nearly 1/4 of us are very stressed and not sure what to do. Okay, so hopefully I can calm you down a little bit. Some of you, or 2 of you, are absolutely horizontal and you're not stressed at all. So we would call those in the UK the Peter Perfects. So we've got a couple of Peter Perfects who are looking forward to SBL and not stressed at all. And then we've got a couple of people who aren't feeling anything. But I'm here to try to serve, well, I'm trying to serve all of you, but that's great. That's great. So thank you for that. So we're slightly stressed. That's where we should be. We don't want to be too stressed though. And maybe I'll talk about some things to make sure we're not too stressed later. The other thing I've got to say to you later is I actually met virtually with the examining team yesterday on a webinar, and they just, I mean, most of it, that I know what the problems are, but I'm going to share with you a little later what they actually said and what their worries were about students doing SBL exam. So yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of what we're going to do during this session, I'm going to brief, this isn't a teaching session, this is a revision session, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of key things. First of all, just remind you why SBL exists, and so you know where the examining team is coming from. I'll just give you a brief overview of a couple of the key things. So in terms of, we'll talk about the rationale, we'll talk about the exam format, and then we'll talk about the key differences. Students still don't quite get the key differences between a strategic business leader exam and exams that they've done before. We'll look at why people fail, and we'll look at what you need to do in the next week or so. Okay, so that's, and we're also going to get lots and lots of questions from you, I hope, so that I can help you pass the exam. All right, so that's how we're going to do this. The first thing, just to remind you, and always bear this in mind when doing questions, is what is the reason for strategic business leader exam existing? What you know, it's different to previous exams. So let's have a look at what the examining team have said about strategic business leader. So first of all, it's a substantially integrated exam, which means that rather than candidates regurgitating knowledge about change management or strategy, what SBL asks you to do is kind of blend that knowledge in a commercial and practical way in the context of the scenario. Yep. So you need to behave like a strategic leader. But always, if you're stuck on something and you don't know what to say, anything, oh, is it change management? Is it culture? It might not be any of them. And have some confidence to think about what you would do in the workplace. You know what to do in the workplace, but many students, they leave that confidence at home and they insist on regurgitating some theory. Yeah, so be careful on that, because the examining team don't like people who just regurgitate theory. So for example, you might have really good knowledge of something like Purcell. Yeah. But in your answer on SBL, it wouldn't be necessary to let the examining team know everything you know about Purcell. Yeah, I would use Purcell to plan my answer. So in my plan, and we can maybe talk a bit about planning in a moment, but if you just listed out political, economic, and there wasn't really anything political there, that doesn't look good. Yep. But if you used Purcell to pick the key points out and explain those in the context of the scenario, that would be much better. Yeah. So use your common sense, use the frameworks to apply knowledge, but don't think, you can mix models up. You don't just have to use Pastel. You don't have to use Pastel at all. But I'd recommend that using a model is quite good for structuring your brain. Yeah. So that's what Strategic Business Leader is talking about. I highlight here, it's an integrated exam. So that means linking the case scenario with your knowledge, and you're behaving as a strategic leader. What else do I want to say about it? Well, I think the final point I want to make is the reference to the workplace. Yep. So it's about making you think, and it's not about making you regurgitate knowledge. And, in the workplace, you do have to think on your feet, and it's a practical exam. It involves role play. That's what you need to prepare yourself for, because in the workplace, you have to think on your feet. So remember that SBL is not some strict, rigid, theoretical exam. There are many ways often how marks can be given for doing well. So the answers you might read in past papers, they're probably much more than will be required. And if you said something different, but it was, in the same, it was reasonable, the examining team can give you credit. Yeah, so that's a bit different. It's, 1 and 1 is always equal to 2 in, PM or whatever, but not in SBL. So have confidence to express opinion. Even if you don't know what to say, don't leave anything blank. In terms of what else do we want to look at? Well, next thing I want to have a look at is just remind you of the key areas. But just before let me go back a slide there. Does anyone have any questions on what I've said so far? Thank you, Jacqueline. I've got my questions on another screen, so I've not been rude. With my camera, I'm looking at there, but sometimes I have to look there at the questions, so apologies. Okay, all good for now. Thank you. Nazir has one. I have a question regarding the SBL. Some of the answers by SCA is really follow the requirement, but some of the answers doesn't really answer the question, but more to answer relevant to case. I think that I'll talk on that one about following the requirement, Nazir. I'll answer that on the basis of a little meeting I had with the examining team just yesterday. When you say some of the answers doesn't really answer the question, I mean, some of the answers that they give are quite, they're not there as an answer, remember, they're there for tutorial purposes, a lot of them. So just remember that. Sia says, how do we know which industry should we cover? You don't, Sia. And if anyone's sending you tips saying, ooh, this year the exam, it's going to be on an airline and the first question is going to be on Pastel, take no notice of them, all right? Because you need to be agile and ready for any industry, and you need to have a little think about that industry. For example, in the last exam, it was talking about an accountancy practice, okay? And one of the questions that it was talking about was governance. And students who were not able to flex their minds didn't do very well, because what those students did on a question of governance, they said, oh, in a governance, you need to have non-executive directors, you need to have a chairman, you need to have a CEO. Well, yes, you do in a public limited company with shareholders, but this was an accountancy practice. It was a partnership. So yes, governance is important, but it was not required to have a CEO and a chairman, because it wasn't a company which governance would traditionally apply its logic to. But, you know, it might be good to have some non-executive directors to give a perspective. But, you know, so some students just saw governance and they just thought chairman, chief executive, non-executive directors, audit committee, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's the scenario? The scenario is an accountancy practice. It's talking about governance in an accountancy practice. So it's not rigidly ruled by corporate governance guidelines, but yeah, say a little bit about how governance could improve. But you didn't, some people just have a fixed mindset. I would say you have to have an open mindset. So those people that say, oh, it's going to be on a public sector or it's going to be on a charity, please, that's not what SBL is teaching you. SBL is teaching you to have a flexible mindset. So if people are sending you tips about the exam's going to be on that, that's, well, it's dishonest. You know, I know the people involved with the examining team at the ACCA more than most, and I don't know what area it's on. Nicole says, can I explain the governance structure of an audit firm? Well, I think a better question, Nicole, would be, can I explain what governance means in general? And in general, if we're talking about governance, it would be a framework which would enable the organization to be run in a way which doesn't just benefit one or two individuals. It benefits all of the participants in the organization, and often to make sure that the business is being run correctly. We do sometimes have external people who have some say and have an ability to be skeptical and critical and scrutinizing what we do. In a PLC, that would be non-executive directors. But just understand the basic principles of governance. In real audit firms, in real life, because of their unlimited liability, I'm not quite sure how it works in Malaysia, but in the UK, PwC and KPMG are now actually limited companies like any other company. But yeah, so it's like, oh, I have to go and learn governance in an audit firm. Just step back. What's governance referring to? What does it look at? How do typical governance structures work? And then think about, well, how might that work in the context of an audit firm? Yeah, I mean, in a way, if you were an audit firm, if it said, is governance relevant in an audit firm? If you were a one partner firm, I'm not sure governance is that relevant, because when we talk about agency theory, we have the principals who are the owners and the agents who are the managers working for the owners. But in a one partner audit firm, the partner, the owner, and the person making all the decisions is the same person. So if they mess up, the whole business goes down the toilet and they lose all their money, the owner. Whereas if I mess up as a managing director of Petronas, I don't lose as much money as my shareholders might lose. So just appreciate that. Hopefully that answers your question, Nicole, and thank you. Oh, we've just got another one. For Pestel just now, do we still gain relevant marks if the answer is put under the wrong heading? Of course, it's not about asking a model. Yep. So it's about coming up with points. Now, how we come up with those points is often through a model. A model can inspire us and help us come up with some points. And I'd always recommend that. And when we are doing that, I would be doing my points. I'd be doing my plan actually in the word processing area of the exam. Just on that, so just to answer the question, it doesn't matter whether you use Pestel, 5 forces, or you don't use a model, that doesn't. So did you put it under legally? But it doesn't matter. Just make that you made the point is important. Yep. So hopefully that answers your question, Sheku. Okay. Right. quick review of what you're supposed to look at. There is syllabus content, which you should use as a framework. I think rather than learn it inside out, you should have a very good familiarity with the areas of leadership. We've just talked about governance. In terms of strategy, if you go on to the ACCA website and you look at articles, I've written a couple of articles on the strategic planning process. You'll find those on the ACCA website, so have a look at that. When we're looking at risk, you know, it's important that you have risk in an organization, because without taking any risk, you're not going to make any money. Think about how we can mitigate risk. So you'd probably think about the TARA model: transfer, avoid, reduce, accept. When we're looking at technology and data analytics, just be appreciative that increasingly technology can automate many things. If I'm thinking, how could technology improve our activities? Well, I might hang it on something I already know. So I might think about how I could hang it on 5 forces. So, you know, think about barriers to entry. Technology could make barriers to entry higher by economies of scale. We could use technology to understand our supplier power more. We could use it to understand our buyer power more. Use IT as a substitute. So, you know, accountants increasingly in transactional accounts are being replaced by robots. So yeah, appreciate what technology can do. Audit, I'm sure you know about that, but you know, what would be the weaknesses of control systems and how to improve control systems. Often, you know, even going back, you don't have to say it, but I'm sure you are familiar with spam SOAP or SOAP spam, segregation of duties, organizational controls, or arithmetic controls. You know, in terms of finance, I'll talk to you in a moment about it, but it's, you know, there's not a lot of marks for doing lots of calculations. You need to contextualize the marks on SBL. That's quite important. And then in the area of everything else, they talk about innovation, change, performance excellence, stuff like that. Again, there was it the Baldrige model came up in an exam 2 or 3 exams ago, and everyone was like, oh my God, I've never learnt it. Well, actually, if you look at that exam, you don't need to have learnt it. It actually gave you everything in the exhibit, and it was just talking about performance excellence. So sometimes people they spend too long looking at that. I mean, be familiar with it. In terms of change, you need a framework, maybe unfreeze, change, refreeze, maybe contextual factors of change, maybe even the cultural web might work out there. But all of these things are not required for you to explain in your answer. The models I've described in articles before are the secret tools of a strategy consultant. So when a strategy consultant is doing some analysis, they probably use Purcell and 5 forces, but they don't say it in their report. But it's clear from reading their report that they've used it as a structure. Okay. I don't know whether you have any quick questions on what's going on there. Okay. So key point I want to make to you is that SBL is not a technical exam. Okay. You're not going to get any marks for regurgitating theory. Okay. It's an applied exam. Sia has said, how can EPSM benefit it for? Well, I'd say if you were starting a course with me, obviously we're a week before the exam now, Sia, so I'm not sure doing EPSM is going to be much useful a week before the exam. But if you were doing one of my students, you know, the exam was a few months away, I would ask you to do EPSM, because I think EPSM benefits you, because if we go back to what we just looked at here, and if you look at the kind of module headings. There are the commercial acumen, evaluation, skepticism. So a lot of the things on the professional skills marks are looked at on EPSM. And EPSM just gives you a good grounding in the area of business. So I would insist on my students doing it before they really get stuck into SBL. But we're a week away from the exam, so I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah. Ethics and professional skills module is EPSM Munchun. Is it all right to not write definitions? Well, you can if you want, but you're not going to get any marks for it. So if you're writing out too much theory, I think the examining team said to me yesterday, students seem to show off that they know this theory. Great. It's not a theory exam. It's not a technical exam. You're not going to get any marks for telling me what you know about the theory. What you're going to get marks for is if you're using the theory to help explain what's going on in this scenario. That's what's important. Chell says, is it all right to not write definitions when applying? Well, I would say you don't have to write definitions. Instead, write more on terms of the case study. Exactly. How frequent would the question specify which model to use? Well, it will never, although I say that, if you look in specimen paper 1 and an exam about 4 or 5 exams ago, it did mention the word model, but the examining team is really, shouldn't be asking you, it will never ask a specific model, but there have been 2 questions where it says using a model. Yeah. So it would not normally ask that. It was asking you for an opinion, and often the best way to get an answer is to use a model, if I'm honest. Akmal says, I read the examiner report for June 2019 on page 3. The candidates made rude comments. I think I think you're slightly misinterpreting that. I think when you're being skeptical, and if you're talking to a chairman and you're being skeptical, you can be skeptical without being blunt or rude. So I think it's important as a professional in the workplace, and you're a junior accountant talking to the managing director and said, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't talk to your managing director like that. You'd probably get sacked. Or as a management consultant writing a report for a client, again, I wouldn't be rude. I would be subtle in how I make my point, but I would be skeptical in doing so. So I think that's what it means by that, Akmal. So to drive the point home, it's not a technical exam. So great questions there. Thank you. In terms of the exam format and style, I'm sure you fully appreciate it, but maybe by me just briefly going over it, you might have the odd question. So in terms of the exam, I think it's a 4-hour exam, 240 minutes. A lot of people would say it's actually a 3-hour exam for which you've got 4 hours to do. There's 80 technical marks and 20 professional skills marks. You only need 50 marks to pass. Yeah. So to get those professional skills marks, you don't have to write anything extra, but you just need to demonstrate professionalism in your answer. I think the professional skills and the technical skills complement each other, and there's a lot of clues from the professional skills marks that you should look at. And often the better the performance in the technical requirements, the better on the professional skills. Yeah. So don't just think you're going to go for technical marks. That's a very risky strategy. Lots of stuff to read. And maybe we can talk. I mean, if I was giving you a technique to read, obviously I read the introduction that contextualizes what's going on. I then read the tasks, and then I read each of the exhibits, and I might just make a little note or a highlight on each of those exhibits that exhibit 1 is linked to task 1, exhibit 3 is looking at task 2, and so on. Yeah, there's not a prescribed number of questions, but all the questions relate to the same scenario. So there's been 3 questions, there's been 5. Again, you've got to be flexible and agile, because some questions you've just been, a junior accountant or an assistant accountant or a management consultant, and on other exams, you have taken a different role each time. So again, watch out for that. Yeah, so that's what the exam looks like. I think you're probably familiar with this at this time. One thing I'd say you should definitely become familiar with, and I can share a video with you to have a look at, and that is the CBE platform. Yep, this, I think, with the pandemic and everything, CBE is definitely here to stay. I don't think the ACCA want to risk students not being able to do exams. So I think, as soon as all exams can be on the CBE platform, practically, I think they will be. Yeah. So it's in your interest to become fully familiar with that, practice, and just be familiar. You don't want to be, if it's your first time doing a strategic professional CBE exam, you definitely need to get on there and just play around. Okay, you can self-assign yourself questions and just become familiar with the word processing stuff. So to summarize, the whole point of SBL is a blend of technical and professional skills, and really read the professional skills marks requirements carefully. So not that it's just skepticism, it often says skeptical, blah, 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 and it gives you a clue with regards to where it wants you to go. So make sure you have a look at that. In terms of tools you just need to be familiar or be confident that if it asks you to do any of these things, you would know what to do. Yep. So yeah, just make sure we do that. Think about who you are as well, and the role you play. Are you I suppose it goes back to your point on being rude, but put yourself, what I would recommend you do, whoever you are, put yourself in that position and think about how you would behave in that position. Yeah, practically engage in this situation. Yeah, and that should give you good guidance on how to behave. In terms of what the exhibits do, well, I'm sure you've got familiarity with lots of past papers, but I think if you are asked, just to go back, if on this one, if you are asked to do any of these briefing notes, working papers, press release, I wouldn't become massively concerned with, what's the difference between a briefing note and a working paper? I would just title it briefing note. And that, because different companies would do briefing notes a different way, and there isn't a definitive one way of doing it. But I think the important thing to do is to acknowledge the fact that you've been asked to do a press release, a briefing note, a heat map. Yep. And to not listen to the requirement is not good. Okay. Alrighty. So, you've seen that, so that's fine. Very quickly on professional skills marks. A professional skills mark, in a very brief summary, is the lens through which we look at the question. Yeah. So if you see, for example, communication skills, it's really important that you, first of all, do it in the correct format. If you see skepticism, probe, question, challenge. So to remind you, these are the professional skills marks. Have a look at, if you're still not quite clear, there's an examiner's article on professional skills mark. Have a look at it. But when I think of skepticism, my mindset when looking at a scenario is one where I'm probing, questioning, challenging. Yeah. If I'm thinking about commercial acumen, I'm looking at it from a business person's perspective and thinking, is it a good idea to put $10,000 alloy wheels on my Proton Saga? probably not. But if you've got a Bentley or something, probably that would be okay, you know, because that would be expected. But, you know, Proton Saga is not going to improve its value with $10,000 alloy wheels. That's what commercial acumen would be. Analysis, are we taking on board all the information? Communication, are we, you know, informing in the correct format, and so on. And evaluation, giving both sides of the story. Yep, that would be what's important there. So please, you know, take some notice of what the professional skills marks ask you to do, because there's often quite good clues as well. Don't just see skepticism or commercial acumen, see the extra little narrative. That's very useful. Okay, so that's a bit about the exam. That's a bit about professional skills marks. What do I want to talk about next? Well, just what is the difference? I think I've said it, but let's just, the difference between strategic business leader and other exams is the rationale. Yep. In terms of what the examining team have to follow, they follow something called Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy is a kind of, what would you describe it? It's a rule book, principles on which the exam has to be set. So there's 3 levels in Bloom's taxonomy. And the level at which SBL is at level 3. So on your applied skills exams and applied knowledge, you normally tested at level 1 and level 2, which is kind of application and analysis, whereas strategic business leader is at level 3, which is about synthesis and evaluation. So big word, but it means that you're not just regurgitating the 7 things. You're kind of, you know, the 7 things, but then you're looking in the scenario and seeing, do those 7 things link together? Yeah. Also, strategic business leader has 20 marks for professional skills. So that, you know, is evaluating whether you are using them in your arguments. So I would always, to help myself, be thinking, how would it work in the workplace? Yep. So just think how you would behave at work. If you're really stuck, please, please, please do not leave any. I cannot understand students who leave blank space. Don't know. Well, have a think. Are you just giving up? No, you're not. Yep. If you're my student, you're going to pass this. Yeah. So think of the workplace content. Think about professionalism. Now, let's now talk about why, but before we do, does anyone have any questions on what I've said about the rationale behind SBL? Okay, great, great, great. Thank you. Okay, all right. Let's move on then. I want to talk about the most important thing now, and that is why people fail SBL. Now, I would say that most people don't fail SBL due to lack of knowledge. Okay, there are certain things that you need to do in order that you can pass SBL that I'm going to explain to you. So I'm going to give you my reason why people fail SBL. But what yeah, I'll bring that poll up in a moment. What I want to talk about first, is something, this is something I attended yesterday. Yeah. So this was an exam review webinar with the examining team. And what did they say? Well, hot off the press, this is in the last 3 exams or so, this is a summation of what students didn't do very well. Okay. And the observation we see there is poor analysis. Is that, I'm just looking at that background picture. That's not the telecoms tower in Malaysia. I don't think it is. Is it? Is it? Yeah, it is. There's a Petronas Tower. So there's the background in Malaysia. So that's what that was their slide yesterday. So that's what's this? Jalan Sultan Ismail, Concord Hotel, maybe. I think so. Anyway, sorry, getting distracted by the picture. I've just picked that up. But talks about poor analysis, addressing requirements, developing points, calculations, time management, and professional skills. And this is what the examining team are not happy about. And when they're not happy, that means they're going to keep testing these things. Yeah. So if you want any tips, you know, I know Malaysia is obsessed with tips. Unfortunately, when the exam is at level 3 Bloom's taxonomy, it's not like PM or FM where it's, oh, well, that didn't come up this year, so it'll come up next year. There's going to be a consolidation question. Yeah, there's always a 40 marker. It's not quite like that on SBL, but if there's any tips, these are your tips about what we need to do, and we need to talk about them. So the first thing is on poor analysis. Now, this is things that you must not do as a student. And what mustn't you do here? Well, poor analysis on the whole, the examining teams say, comes from the fact that students will often be very capable at using the copy and paste facility in the CBE area, but they simply copy a bit of the exhibit, bring it into their word processing, and that's it. And often the parts they copy are correct, and they are the relevant areas. But if you simply copy and paste parts of the examination script, like requirements, into your answer, you're not going to get any marks. Okay, you're also just going to waste your time. So what the lesson is from the examining team is, yes, you identified the right area, but what you need to do is you need to interpret that. Yeah. And you need to give your spin on what you understand from what's given in the exhibit in your own words. Well, if you do that, you're adding value. And if you do that, you'll gain some marks. So, you know, analysis, you've got to put things in your own words. All right. So just take what it said, you pick the right area up. What's it mean? What's it talking about? Okay. Are we clear on that? Okay. Okay. All right. Next thing, addressing the requirements. Well, again, I think it's these people who, you know, incorrectly are given tips by their tutor. Yeah. And a lot of students don't correctly focus on the requirements. Yeah. I think the examiner says the students who read the introduction will be able to contextualize the requirements much more. Yeah, I'll often give you some direction to the main exhibits, which are relevant in a particular task. Yeah. Also, professional skills marks will often give you some hints. Yeah, but what the examining team are seeing is, say there was a question 3 exams ago, which is on the ACCA website, and it was talking about change. And maybe it wasn't, yeah, it was change, but it was probably from the scenario, it's more of a culture being changed. So the answer in the exam 3 years ago used the cultural web as a rough framework to help explain the change. Well, what students seem to be doing is they're looking at past papers and they say, oh, it's changed, cultural web, when there was no culture at all in the question this time. Yeah. So there seems to be a tendency that a lot of students use the same kind of approach as was suggested in a previous exam, even though the question is in a different context. Yeah. What the examining team wanted to stress was every exam is different. And even if the tasks are similar to a previous exam, you must treat them as unique to ensure maximum marks are achieved. Yeah. So just be careful on that one. Yeah. So there isn't, seem to want to do a formulaic answer. You want an answer in the context of the scenario. Yeah. So don't just feel, oh, it's change or it's, you know, portfolio analysis. Cheng's asking me a question. General knowledge of the industry of the case is very important, is what Cheng Wei thinks, as you would not know how to solve problems the company is facing if you have no knowledge of the industry. I would say, Cheng, I think knowledge of business is important, but I don't think it's knowledge of a specific business. Whether you are an airline company, whether you're a charity, whether you're a local authority, business, yes, has slightly different focus, but the general principles behind it are similar. So I think you need to get your brain in the context of a business as opposed to a textbook. Yeah. The next thing they talked about was developing points. Yep. And what would normally happen if you give a reasonable articulated point, you'll get 1 mark. If you develop that point further, it then might be awarded a 2nd mark. The examining team say most students are failing to develop their points sufficiently. And I would say it's really important that you really try and get that 2nd mark, okay? And so how are we going to get that 2nd mark? Well, we use the information in the exhibits, yeah, and then, you know, try to picture it, and then, you know, what's the consequence of what's happening here? Yeah, you know, I would encourage you to think why, so what? I've given the point, so what, why is it relevant? And saying that to yourself in your brain is going to prompt you to say more things. Yeah, you could also follow up the point with an example, which is either related to the case or even related to real life. That would be useful to demonstrate to the marker you know what you're talking about. Cheng says, I noticed that from the specimen papers, the answers are very specific in solving the problems. Yeah, well, they are the answers are in the context of the scenario. So I think rail track is a good specimen paper. That was the 2nd one, and you know, it's specific. It's not generic. So, you know, they're talking about control systems, and some people just think control systems need to be the. It's like, no, think about it. So it's, you know, it's the LRT in KL, or it's about, you know, how do we have an inspector on the bus, we have an inspector at the railway station. So is that specific? I suppose, but you know, tickets are universal. You don't need to know a lot about a train company. You can imagine, I think, hopefully, put yourself in the shoes. What else? Calculations. Well, there is evidence that students are really good at calculations. Obviously you are. You've passed, you know, all the exams up till now, which mainly require calculations. But what a lot of students do on SBL is they do the calculations and then do nothing with them. Yeah. And the exam team really clear. If you don't evaluate and analyze the numbers, you're not going to get any marks. So even if you do the numbers and you just leave them, you're probably not going to get any marks. At SBL, the important point is, what do the numbers mean in the context of the scenario? What do the numbers mean? Yep. And often SBL rarely asks you to calculate numbers because, you know, you've shown you can do that on earlier exams. Yep. And you know when you're looking at numbers, or if you're given numbers, what I would suggest you should be doing is you should be asking, you know, how am I going to include these calculations in my commentary? Yeah, and in my commentary, what probably would be the main calculations I'd need to use to support that commentary? So, you know, it's the commentary which is important on calculations, not the calculations. Okay. Now, this one shouldn't be an issue because you know, people go on and on about time management. Yeah. But what I'd like you to do before I say anything more on time management is just ask you a quick poll. So just bear with me. So there's a poll going to come up on your screen. There's 2 questions. I want you to have a look at these questions. Once you finish question 1, there's also question 2. Give you 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, all right, I'm going to end that. So let's share the results with you. On question 1, how long does the ACCA recommend you spend reading and planning the information? Well, if you have read what the ACCA put an awful lot of effort into on their website, you would know the answer to this, and only 40% of you know the answer, or 39. 40 minutes is what is recommended. Yep. Now, 30 minutes is pretty quick, I would say, and it isn't recommended. And it's not to say you can't spend 60 minutes, but the recommendation by the ACCA is about 40, and I'll explain more. So that would reflect that you are maybe not reading all the information available on the ACCA website. 60 minutes isn't wrong, but it's not what the ACCA say. You would have to adjust your timing accordingly, whichever you choose. A little worrying that someone would spend as long as it takes. Sadly, you're going to fail the exam if you spend as long as it takes, because it is a timed exam. It isn't give it to me when you're finished. Yeah, so the correct answer to question 1 was actually 40 minutes. What time should you spend on the mark allocation? 2 marks on technical, half on professional marks, 40% say that. 1.5 minutes on technical marks, 1 minute on professional, 22% of you say that. 35% of you say 2.5 minutes on technical marks, and then 4% of you say 1.25 on technical, 1.25 on professional. Interesting. Again, if you're reading the information, the professional skills marks take no time to acquire. They are awarded for how you put your answer together, and they take no time. So the correct answer is 2.5 minutes and 0 on professional skills marks. Again, lots of advice on that if you're reading articles on professional skills marks. So I would suggest to you, you need to just brush up on time management. I'm going to talk to you about it, obviously, and on professional skills marks. So interesting. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Have we got any questions here? Okay, we've got a few. Sorry, let me just go. Can I develop my points towards the impacts which relates to mission statements of the company? Well, Taufik, it depends on what the question is. If the question is asking you about the impact relating to mission, yes, but don't just randomly bring it in. Is it okay if we don't show how we calculate? Good question, Jing. I would be doing my calculation if I'm asked to do one. in the word processing area. Yep. And then I would probably clearly say this is question 1 calculations, and I would do most of my answering in the word processing area. Sorry, the spreadsheet area of doing a calculation. In the word processing area, see appendix 1 in the spreadsheet area. That's how I do that. So yes, exactly, Jing, like an appendix. Cheng Wei, find it difficult to practice how much time to be spent for each marks practically during the exam. Well, you've got to practice more, Cheng Wei, because that is really important. That is a major reason for failing time management. So 2.5 minutes a mark. Write it down, start and finish time. Taufik, I guess we shall develop the point according to the requirement. Yes, we shall. And I don't think can put a real life example. No, you can put a real life example. The examining team said that to me yesterday. Yeah, but it has to make sense, and it has to be in the context of what's being said. Are points based on assumptions on real life acceptable? Yes, they are, Chua. The amount of time spent for each exhibit would depend by how deep your understanding needs to be. Well, you got to practice, absorbing and reading these things, Cheng Wei. So 40 minutes, my advice would be, so I don't, because it's quite, 40 minutes is a long time. I read the introduction, I read the tasks, I'm making a mental note of the tasks, and then I go through the exhibits. And I see exhibit 1 is kind of linked to task 1. Exhibit 2 is more task 2 and task 3. Exhibit 3, yeah, maybe that's task 4. Exhibit 5 probably could help with task 2. And I make that little note. Adley says, can I mention real life companies, a person, if it's really Nelson Mandela and McDonald's, yes, but you can't just say e.g. McDonald's. You must explain what you mean by McDonald's and what they do, or what Nelson Mandela does. Can the calculation be made on the answer plan? Well, the beauty of the CBE exam is, you can do your plan and then you can start using that as subheading. So yeah, rough plan, but I would put my calculation into my answer, not my answer plan. And I also, just on that point, I wouldn't be using the scratchpad area. I'd be doing all my planning on the word processing. Okay. So going back to time management, this is an area which students don't do very well on, but keep getting told how to do well on it. Yeah. And what the examining team find that students don't do is they spend too long on an area that they know quite a lot about. So they spend a long time on an area they know a lot about, they have a lot of knowledge, and they like to kind of show off how much they know. Well, talk about, they give knowledge of their models. There's no marks for that. Yeah. The exam, remember, project management exercise in mark acquisition. It's a project management exercise in mark acquisition. And you need to treat the exam just like that. Yeah. So the first question is 20 marks. You've spent 40 minutes reading it, 2.5 minutes a mark, do the calculation. Yeah. First bit might be 10 times 2.5 is 25 minutes. The time is 7:33, 25 minutes after 7:33 would be 7:58. That's how you do it. Yeah. So really make sure, and you need to almost feel, I can say more. Of course you can say more. You only need 50%. It's important you get 50% of the whole paper. Then you pass. All right. So you'll all have been given lots of information. Sia's doing paper-based exam. Can I draft my planning? No, as long, so sorry, Sia's doing a paper-based exam. Yeah, okay, I apologize. I didn't think anyone was actually doing paper-based exams much this time, but it would seem that some of you still are. How does it apply? On a paper-based exam, I would do a plan on my paper, yes. I would title it plan, and then I would title answer. It's very obvious to the marker when you say it's a plan that it is a plan. Okay. Sorry, I'm misinterpreting. I was thinking because of COVID that paper-based exams had been kind of knocked on the head a bit. But yeah, it's the same principle. It's the same principle. Yeah. Okay. So if we're doing paper-based in terms of calculations, yeah, just put them on your answer paper. Okay. Any questions on time management then? I mean, Kirk says calculations need to be done in appendix. Yes, it's good practice too. Yes, they don't need to be, but as a professional person, that would be how it would normally be presented. The thing I'd say about planning, so Kayla's asked about planning. Kayla, do it not just to panelists, do it to panelists and attendees, and Sia, not just to panelists and attendees, so everyone can see your question. So is it better to do the planning in the answer sheet or in the extra paper? I would suggest that if you are a borderline person, if you're getting 45 or more, the examining team are going to give a good look at your paper. And it might be that they really want you to pass and they see you've done an amazing plan, but then you don't follow that through. That could get you credit. I'm not saying it does, but it could. So I think it's, if you didn't hand in any plan, there's no chance it would ever be looked at. Whereas if you hand it in, but I wouldn't do my plans expecting them to be marked, but there's a chance they might be looked at. So only do your planning on stuff that you would hand in, would be my advice. And then professional skills marks. What did they say about professional skills marks? Well, they did say that students are actually getting better at reading the professional skills marks. But the one area that they're not doing so well on is skepticism. Yeah. And some students seem to think that it's enough to say, I'm skeptical or I question it. Well, no, that's not enough. You have to say more than that. And I think the best way in which you can be skeptical is put yourself in the other person's shoes and try to think about why their view might not be as objective as their view could be. And maybe suggest why their view could be subject to bias. But as someone said about rude remarks, I think you need to show tact in your skepticism. Yeah. And be subtle with your skeptical opinion as you would do in the workplace. Yeah. Also, if you see professional skills marks for evaluation, look at the positive and the negative. People don't always do that. They just look at the positive. All right. So that is a quick summation of what was said yesterday by the examining team, and I was present on that. What I want to look at now is just go over why people fail this exam. Yeah, and I'm giving you this information as someone who's been involved in this whole examining game for 25 years and always in the kind of SBL related paper areas. So I was involved in P1, P3, P12, P3.5, lots and lots. And students don't really change over those years. And the number one reason people don't do so well is poor time management. Yep. You need to make sure that it's a project management and you're thinking of 2.5 marks a minute. You're trying to keep it to 40 minutes reading and planning. Talk about it more in a moment. You don't read and plan your answer correctly. Your business writing is not great. And you don't focus on the professional skills marks. Okay, so they are key reasons people fail. I want to address each of them, and I want to make sure that we get these cleared up and they don't happen in your answer. couple of questions. Hannes, my mind went blank when I see an industry or requirement that I'm not familiar with, and it's wasted my time. I'm going to give you some advice in a moment, Hannes, about when your mind goes blank. So I'm going to come back to you on that question. Nicole, for evaluation, do we need to mention about the negative side of the question asked? Yes, you do. Yeah. If you're doing evaluation, evaluation, you should give the downside. Yes. Are we allowed to use short forms in exams? I think if you maybe, it's a big long company name and you put it in brackets, ABC, and then use ABC afterwards, that would be fine, Elila. Okay, let's talk about time management. So when time is up, you must leave. Yep. So you must have a strict time budget. You've got 250 minutes in total. If we say 40 minutes for reading and planning, that leaves us with 200. Now, it takes no time to get the professional skills marks, as we've said. So we divide 200 by 80, and that's where I get my 2.5 minutes a mark from. Okay, and I would be writing down start and finish. Yeah, it's a project management exercise. All right. So if it's 10 marks, it's 25 minutes, and I must leave. Yeah. What else? When I'm looking at a scenario, I try and break it up. Think about how it links to each task. I also try to picture it. I try to think, well, how can I relate to this? Maybe I don't know about that particular industry, but I might know a similar industry. Yeah. So break it up into paragraphs. You can highlight the key words, whether you're doing a paper or a computer-based, and try and picture it, make it real. Yep. Keywords. What's the story tell? Picture it, make it real. Really important. In terms of your reading and planning, the requirements, obviously, really important. That should establish, the structure to your answer. What are the key things you need to focus on? What are the key words? Watch out for requirements if it asks you to do slides and stuff like that. So the format's really important. What's the verb? What's it asking? Really, really important to think of the verb, and also to think of the rule of and, because sometimes students just focus on the first part of the question when there's a whole question there, but you just look at the first bit. So the rule of and, let me show you an example. So discuss the benefits and drawbacks of World Air Alliance, and determining its future aims and objectives. So when you look at a question like that, there's actually 4 separate parts. Yeah, a lot of people just look at half of the question. So watch out for that. I've just got a question from Cheng Wei. Referring to time management, how do you know what you wrote will earn marks and whether your time is well spent? Well, that comes in your planning of your answer. So you would do a brainstorm, and my advice would be, I read the requirements once, I read it twice, I do a brainstorm of all the things I possibly could say, and then I look at how many marks are available. And what I then do is I think about, have I said enough? Can I say more? Can I say less? And that's my plan, and I will use those as separate subheadings. Okay. Right. Spot the marking guide. So yeah, this is like what I'm saying here. You're not going to be 100% accurate, but it's important when reading a requirement to decide how many marks are going to be given to each task. Yep. So So let's say here, discuss whether or not the objectives of a director of a quoted company are likely to conflict with those of the shareholders. 10 marks. So what would I do here? Well, maybe I'm thinking 4 marks for the objectives of the directors, 4 marks for the objectives of the stakeholders, and maybe 2 for the conflict. You're not going to be 100% accurate, and the marking scheme might give for objectives of directors up to 5 marks, objectives up to 5 marks, conflict up to 4 marks, maximum of 10. So there's always flexibility. Yeah, but I think you have a plan of attack. Okay, so I think that kind of, Cheng Wei, might answer your question there. In terms of presentation tips, what are we thinking? Well, the key thing is the marker is the person who is going to help you pass or fail. Help them mark your paper. Yep, have a clear layout, subheadings, leave white space and gaps. Start with a good opening statement. Yeah, that's important. So don't start with it, because it just gives the marker confidence you know what you're talking about. So here we go. There's an answer here. This is what I did back in what was P3 at the time. And we did this with the examining team, and we tested some markers out on this exercise. And an answer was written like this, and we asked them to mark it with a marking guide. Yep, okay, yep, okay, yep. And then we gave them the same answer written like this, and we said, mark this, and they went, yep, yep, yep. And it got similar marks. However, when we said, okay, here's a question and a marking guide, and we showed them like this, and then we showed it to them like this, you've got 2 minutes to do it. This one got more marks. So when people are under time pressure, which markers are, they're likely to find it easier to mark when it's well spaced out. So please help the marker mark your paper. Yeah, that's important. I would advise, if you've got a study buddy and you can share answers with, maybe because you're locked down, you can email them to each other, but mark each other's. Yeah, that's a good little thing to maybe think about doing in the next week. What else do I think you need to be doing? Well, I think you should have or do at least 1 mock at a time. A lot of people are in denial and they pray, oh, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. Well, no, that's the whole point of doing a mock. Yep, for my students who study with me, they do 3 full 4-hour mocks on the CBE platform to time, and they get marked. First time, they do okay, they make mistakes, they learn from the mistakes, and the next time, they don't make those mistakes, and they make a few other mistakes. They learn from those, so the third time, they're pretty good and pretty confident. It really helps you understand timing, it helps you understand layout, it helps you understand pressure. I insist on everyone doing a mock to time, so that's really important. In terms of how is SBL marked, give you a very quick overview of how it's marked so you understand. Kirk has asked me a question. Are we supposed to write in paragraphs? How to better, well, you don't have to write in paragraphs, but I think it makes the ability to navigate. If you have a report at work, Kirk, is it just a solid block of writing, or is it broken down with subheadings? Of course, it's broken down in subheadings because that makes it easier to read. Can I say more about a PID? I think it came out. A PID is a project initiation document. It is just a plan of action that we use in project management. Yeah, so that's all it is. So Jacqueline, a PID, project initiation document, it's what you put down, it's what we're going to do, how long it's going to take, who's the project manager, who's the project sponsor, that's all it is. And I think it referred to a question in an exam where the project initiation document wasn't very good, and you were just asked to kind of say, how could it be better? But the person who did it was a junior person who did it without being asked. So, don't be too hard on them. It's like, great for you doing this, but there's a few things need to be done. So how does it work? You've got a marking session lead who is the examiner. There's someone from the ACCA who is there to hold the examiner to account. Obviously a few students taking the exam. So we've got team leaders working for the examiner who have teams of markers working for them. Okay, So that's how the structure of the marking is set up. All I want to talk to you about is, you know, there is not one definitive answer, okay? And what happens is the marking session lead will select about 8 scripts and will mark them. And then other members of the marking team, the team leaders, they'll all mark them. And then they'll have a long chat with regards to what marks would be given for, because although an answer was written, there's sometimes students come up with other things and the examining team say, well, would we give a mark for that? Yeah, we would. So then they develop a full marking guide. And so we've got a marking guide. And then what happens is standardization scripts are created. And how do they work? Well, they are sample answers of a student, and the markers are given a marking guide and are asked to mark these scripts. Now, they don't all give the same marks, because some give too much, some give too, and this creates a training process for the markers, and until they get it right, they're not allowed to start marking. Yeah, and once they start getting it right, they can be approved to mark, and the marking process starts. But in the batch of scripts that the markers mark, there are what are called seeding scripts, which are scripts in there that have already been marked by the examining team, and they should be giving them 42, they should be giving them 60, and the markers mark is compared to the seeding script mark, and if it's different, they're going to be in trouble. Yeah, so my point is very accurate, it's very consistent, and be confident with it. So the principles are: suggested answers are examples of strong answers, but you will be given credit for any answer, and there is no negative marking. There's no negative marking for spelling or poor English or anything like that. Yeah, as long as I can understand what you're saying, I'll give you the marks. Okay. What else? It's normally 1 or 2 marks per point. I've mentioned that already. Think about the intellectual levels. It's technical knowledge in the context of what's going on. So going back to what I was saying in Bloom's taxonomy, you're at the evaluation and synthesizing. You're not just repeating stuff, you're contextualizing it, you're applying it, you're taking the information and giving your own spin. So don't worry too much about intellectual levels. So what do we need to do now in the next week? Okay, what I'd say is you are the architect of your future. Whether you pass or fail the exam is determined by you. And even if you haven't done lots of work, you are in charge of whether you pass or fail. So let me talk about a few things that are going to impact on passing and failing exams. First of all, I've written a few articles on Student Accountant magazine. You can find them. In terms of what I've written about, I think it's really important for you to realize that, look, you're going to pass this exam. What's it going to bring to you? That's going to motivate you. What am I going to get? What's it going to bring? You know, I'm never going to have to study again, some of us. So my goodness, I've got 7 days to change my life. Let's make the most of it. Yep. So get something tangible. It can't just be because I want to be an accountant. It's got to be something tangible. It's got to be something that's going to benefit us. Yep. Get yourself organized, get yourself planning. So there's a thing there. Get yourself study fit. So that basically means think about studying at a time when your brain works best. Are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? And you know, think about where you work, when you study, when you exercise, when you relax. It's a marathon the next 7 days. It's not a sprint. We've got to be in tip-top condition for the next 7 days. Yeah. And in order that that's going to happen, we need a plan. Okay. So in our plan, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to think about what's important in life. And obviously exams do have to take priority. Okay. I think you need to break your days down into no more than an hour. And within that day, there's time for exercise and play. Really important. I think you need to think about when you're most productive. So, you know, that's when you're going to work best. I think you need to get a routine. So you need to go to bed at a certain time and get up at a certain time. Yeah. So I would recommend this 3 months out, but definitely 7 days out. So, get some routine going, find out when you're working best, and that's maybe when to think about studying. Get yourself deadlines for what you need to achieve each day and hold yourself accountable. Yeah. Time management techniques are very useful. There's various ones available on the web, but a lot of people say our brain kind of loses it after about 30 minutes. So there's something, break it into cycles of 30. If you're a really good studier, you might be able to move it up to 45, but short bursts help prevent the mind wandering. Get rid of your mobile phone and turn off notifications. They're just very distracting. Yeah. And give yourself a little reward for completing things, whatever it is, a walk around the block, a little, bar of chocolate, whatever works. Yep. And you do need, even this close to the exam, you do need to give yourself some time. I think exercise is a good thing. So go and do some exercise, a run, a walk, whatever, just gets your endorphins going. Yeah. Endorphins are the natural antidote to stress. Yep. Picture yourself passing this exam. I'm going to pass this exam. In 7 days' time, the exam's going to be over and I'm going to be successful. Another thing that helps, apparently, is keeping our brain hydrated. Our brain doesn't tell us it's dehydrated until it's really too late. So, keep hydrated. Maybe get up in the morning, get of energy, play some music that's getting you, alive. Think about where you work. Yeah. Think about what you eat, nutrition. The best thing, I think, is to have what would be described as low GI foods. So if you're eating, high GI foods, which tend to be white flour, tend to be sweet and sugary, what they do is they give you a bit of a high and then boom, because everything gets converted to glycogen. Ugh. So complex grains take longer to be processed by our body, and that gives us less of a sugar release. I mean, sometimes things like fruit, you've got to be a little bit careful. They do give a quick sugar release, but certainly green vegetables and stuff like that, yeah, important. Play music as well, keeping you going. When are you going to do this? Well, you're going to do it every day this week, aren't you? Yeah. You're going to have started a while ago, but you're going to break your life down into chunks. The other thing I'd recommend is you need also to help your brain, just like when you work out and you relax, when you're working out your brain, you also need to work it out. So I think on Spotify, there's an app called Headspace, but any kind of mindfulness exercise, which is basically, stretching and like helping your brain cool down, is a really good thing to do. So make sure you do that, and make sure you have exercise and diet into the next 7 days, because that's going to help you. Okay. And the most important thing, you have not come this far only to come this far. The prize is within reach. In order that we do that, we need to make sure our knowledge is consolidated over the next 7 days. We need to, on the exam day, to not panic. And if we do panic, we're going to use some mindfulness techniques. So when we are, take a breath, just 2 minutes away, and then come back. And hopefully that will stop you panicking. But, nothing is going to take this prize, this visual that you have that's going to get you success. Focus on that. That's going to drag you through the tough times of the next few days. So in terms of what I want you to do, as well as focus on the prize, I want you to make sure you break your study into manageable chunks and you have it clearly set out. And in those chunks, you've got time for exercise. I also want you to have in your diary time to relax your brain. And I also want you to have in your diary time for exercise and think about your diet and make it regular. They're the key things I want you to do. So it's not like, oh, question 1 is going to be governance. Question 2A is going to be about strategy. you know, it's a level 3 Bloom's taxonomy exam. I think it's a foolish strategy to predict that, but you need to be agile, flexible. Questions are going to come at you which are a bit strange. Okay, I can deal with that. Let's roll with it and let's see what I can say. Use your knowledge as a catalyst to apply, you know, plans, but you don't need to reveal all that knowledge in your answer. Okay, so that's key. Yep. So that summarizes what I wanted you to do. That would be the overview of how I'd like you to approach. I'd like to wish you the very best of luck, but you don't need luck if you apply what I've asked you to do. Break your time into chunks. Think about exercise and diet. When you are breaking your life into chunks, you have time in there for exercise. You have time in for a bit of mindfulness. Really important. The ACCA also have a lot of mental health resources, which again, mental health is just exercising our brain. Our brain is a muscle, just like it would be a good idea to do physical exercise, go for a run, go to the gym. It's the same thing about mindfulness. It's like a brain gym. That's what it is. So if there's things I haven't covered that you will want me to cover or you'd like me to cover, please fire away with your questions and I will answer them all for you. We've got about 20 minutes maximum to answer questions, so any that you have, please let me know. If you disagree with stuff, absolutely fine. Shreya said, would cryptocurrency be tested this time? Cryptocurrency is very relevant. Bitcoin has gone up 6,000% in the last few months. Your exam would have been set, more than a few months ago. Cryptocurrency, definitely. Cryptocurrency, shared ledgers and all of that. I think you should have an awareness of it. You will not get a detailed question on it, but any modern accountancy student who doesn't know about cryptocurrency, well, they should. Yeah, it's something talked about a lot. So you should have awareness of it. So have a general awareness of it. How could we know that our answer will be worth 1 mark or 2 marks? Because, Nicole, you do what I suggested, and you ask why. So what? What's the consequence? Those suggestions I gave would be how. Technical articles, I think, are you should. I mean, SBL is testing your general awareness, so it's not like, oh, read Article 1 and Article 5, but not Article 2 and 3. You need to have an awareness of what's going on. So certainly things like cryptocurrency are very relevant. Thinking about automation of the finance person of the future is one that's not going to be doing the numbers, but is going to be interpreting the numbers. The numbers are going to be done by machines. And quite a few of the articles talk about that. Normally, how to answer the professional skill for commercial acumen. Well, would in real life, as I said, would you put $10,000 alloy wheels on your Proton Saga? No, that would be ridiculous. But if you had a, $300,000 Bentley, yes, you probably would. You wouldn't put cheap wheels on a $300,000 Bentley. Makes sense? If you live in a $100,000 apartment, would you put a $120,000 kitchen in it? No, you wouldn't. But if you lived in a multi-million penthouse, you probably would have to. Kirk, for evaluation, but narrative notes talks about only the benefits. Do we still need to? Yes, I think we do. If you're evaluating, and evaluation gives the other side. Sean, do you have an article for those who marginally failed the paper? What should we work on specifically? Time management, mark focus, professional skills marks, Sabrina. Yeah, people who marginally fail tend to get 43 out of 80. Which actually is a pass percentage-wise, but you need to get over 50. You need to answer 100% of the paper. Where could I find the related exam format? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question, Michelle. And Michelle, can you do it to panelists and all attendees? Mon, what can I do in next week to help me more flexible in questions rather just practice past year? Yes, they won't repeat. I think a good thing to do also is, as some of you are doing, is read the examiner's reports. Yeah, they give a good insight into how students don't do well. Can you recommend the sequence of looking at questions? I think because it's quite a long exam, I would look at the tasks and try to make a mental note of them, and then link which exhibits are connected to those tasks. That's what I would do. Diana, RBP, yes, in their kits, BPP and Kaplan are the only official ACCA publishers. So I run courses, which are my courses that I've written, but I do use the Kaplan kit because that's the official publisher. So they are good. They give you some brain consolidation bits in areas, and they also have some case scenarios. So, yep. Would you recommend to read Kent? Yes, I would, but that should be part of your general study. You know, when people say integrated reporting, I would be looking at something like Tesco. So yeah, it's good to see how they are in real life. Is there any compulsory? There's nothing compulsory. It's about having a rounded knowledge. But, you know, if you read something like Tesco's annual report, it will give you a good insight to what is included in a modern set of accounts. And only about a third of it is accounts. The rest of it is corporate governance. It's about social responsibility. So yes, it's good to see what real companies do. Formats for reports, emails, press release can be found in tech. They can, but I mean, there isn't, you know, report to from date report. Yeah, different companies will do it different ways. Nicole, do you know any source that we can get our well, I do a full mocking service, Nicole, but not 7 days before the exam, because 7 days before the exam, you need to reflect on what you got marked. So maybe in the if you've got a study buddy who can mark stuff, that's going to work. But you know, we've got 7 days to go. I think you might want to, you need to understand where you're not going right, and time management is a big thing to expose yourself to. If all our points, will I get equal marks? Well, all parts might not be in the marking scheme. That's why you read the examiner's report. No, that's not true, and they're not an ACCA marker. If it's not in the marking scheme, you won't get a point. It's specifically stated on the marking guide of markers, marks will be awarded for any relevant point. So I'm sorry to say, Cheng Wei, if it's not on the marking scheme, it will still potentially get a point. So that is incorrect. Nick Hakima, can I do an appendix on the beginning? Yes, you can do it. Well, as long as it's clear, Nick, that's the point. I feel more comfortable reading the exhibits first, following. Well, the only problem with reading the exhibits first is they're not contextualized. If you read the tasks first, you contextualize them. So I would say that is a bit risky and it's going to take you longer. Well, Mon says, how do we know whether we are over under the question requirement to avoid overwriting? Well, to avoid overwriting, you've got a time budget and you've done a brainstorm, there's 10 marks. You come up with maybe 7 points. You maybe can develop those points into 2, but maybe not. So it might be safe to do at least 7. That would be what I'd say there. So great questions, great questions. Any more questions? The key thing, just whilst maybe you're thinking, is to have confidence on the day. Yeah. And when I see a question, I don't know what to do. I don't say, I don't know. I think, what can I say? What is it about? Let's step back. Let's think about this. Let's try and put it in real life and let's give some marks. If you write nothing as a marker, I can't give you anything. But if you think of a structured argument, which is reasonable, that's fine. Kent says, is it possible for new types of diverse formats to come out? E.g. a press release statement is a different format. I mean, have you never seen a press release on the telly? You know, Malaysian Airlines issued a press release and just, you know, it could do, but they've given the main ones. I wouldn't obsess with that, Ken. Is it okay to draft the answer planning in the answer sheet? Yes. Again, as I said, yes, definitely, because it might get marked, Priyan. For 20 marks, how many points recommended do I need? Well, how many do you need to pass? You need 50%. Okay. If I would try to give at least maybe 11 points. Hopefully I'm going to make those points into 2, but I'm not going to assume I'm going to get 2 for everyone. So if in the worst case scenario, I get 1, at least I've got 50%. That's what I'd say. So Chell has kind of, asked a question that I've just answered. You know, if it's a 10-mark question, should I give 5 points? It's a bit risky. I'd maybe try and give 6. So at least if you're only getting 1 mark a point, you're still passing it. If we give examples, will markers not give marks because it's not linked to the evidence in the case? If it's in the context of the case and it helps articulate the argument, you will get a mark for the example. If we look relevant exhibits first and then answer then how we discover, I think my advice would be to read tasks first so they're contextualized. It's not about quantity. So Che says 4 sentences for 2 marks is sufficient. No, 1 sentence for 2 marks could be sufficient. Depends how long your sentence is. It depends on whether you develop the so what and why. If running out of time, would point form, it wouldn't get as many Akmal, so be careful on that one. Manage your time carefully. Professional marks are subjective. How do we ensure we get the maximum? You follow what is asked. It's pretty clear what's asked and you're given quite a lot of hints. Have a look at the answer of professional skills marking guide. Leon, sir, may I know other ways to construct the answer other than reason or consequence? Are you talking about getting an extra mark? Well, so what? So you made your point, which is reasonable. So what? Why is that relevant? What's the issue here? Why is this point? You know, that's what you need to think about. Will the same point in exhibit be used? It could be, Kayla. It could be used more than once. Do I have any tips on question setup? What does one mark? A fully articulated point, but not just copying and pasting the information. You need to add your own interpretation of the question to get the mark. Great, lots of great questions. Hopefully they're helpful. Conclusions can get up to 2 marks on longer questions. So if you've got time, a conclusion is good practice, just like you would write a conclusion to a report at work. So yes. Sorry, I keep looking away because my questions are over here. Maybe I'll bring that chat over here now. Yes, Cheng Wei, that's a very good point. Cheng Wei, can you write your question to panelists and attendees so they can see it? So Cheng Wei has asked, the worst fear is that we misinterpret the questions. How could we avoid that? Well, it is a common mistake in exams, and my advice would be, I read the requirements once, read the requirements twice. I then do a brainstorm. I'd look at the marks and I think, oh, from that brainstorm, there's my mark focus. And then I do a plan. And then I come back to the requirements. I read it one more time and just say, have I answered in my plan those requirements? And often it's when you go back that you see it says advantages and disadvantages. And actually, you only answered the advantages. So yeah, that would be my advice there. Should I carry out a reduction? Be careful. Don't write long introductions. There's not a lot of marks for it. No. 2 marks. Do we repeat the points? Well, you kind of repeat the points, but you articulate and synthesize the MACMAL. That's what a conclusion is. You're bringing it together. There is marks awarded for your ability, not just to repeat the points, but to bring them together. Fellest, if the question requirement asks section of report, do we need to draft the introduction? Well, it's a fair point. I mean, you just maybe not, but I mean, some reports are long, and you might be concluding. If you look at real reports in real life, they do have conclusions for each separate section. So again, just think about real life, fellas. Chell, you're going to have to address it to all attendees and panelists. Fellas, when I go through major examiner answers, Chell is saying introduction. Well, okay, the real answers are not, the answers given to the exam are examples. They're for tutorial purposes. They're not representative of what's expected. So do I need to write an introduction? Sorry, your question's split here. So fellas, I mean, if it's a report, I mean, you know, it would be appropriate. Yeah. Answering Chell, is it needed to write an introduction when writing a report? I mean, it's appropriate, but it's got to be quite brief, Chell. If I'm honest, there's not often many, if any, marks for that. Do we need to answer questions in sequence, or can we jump around? You can do whatever you like, but often the questions do follow on in a kind of story. So you have to answer all of them. So it sometimes might be better to answer them in the sequence, but there's no problem if you don't. If the requirement is more than one, well, it's normally broken down. So it's 20 marks, might be 8 marks, might be 6 marks, and professional skills marks. So 8 marks, 2.5 times 8, we're looking at 20 minutes. Yeah. Brian, since we have only 7 days for the exam, is practicing past years still practical, or should we focus on reading the examiner's reports? I think you should do both, Brian. You've got time to do both. I'm not saying practice all exams to time, but if you've never done an exam to time, I would suggest that it's like doing your driving test for the first time and not having got in a car before your driving test. So yeah, it's really important. One thing I do is I do post stuff, and will post. I've got a countdown going on LinkedIn. So on here, there's a LinkedIn. I don't know if you use LinkedIn, but there's some good stuff there to help you. And I post some stuff up there on countdown and what you need to do. And I've got previous posts linked to things going on. So that's, you know, there's no charge. It's all free. And yeah, you might find that useful. So if you have a look at my LinkedIn, that's something I kind of try to help students who may need some help on. So you can have a look at that. That might be worth doing going forward. Felicia says, do we need to show detailed working for figures? I mean, you might do, but you're not going to get any marks for doing the figures, as I've said to you, and that's what the examining team said to me yesterday. You're going to get marks for interpreting the figures. What year did I take a picture of the pink bus? Probably the 90s, Munchun. That won't be an exam question though. Mohammed, is it read articles regarding events in real life? Yes, it is. So obviously in Malaysia, you've had your scandals, haven't you? I've forgotten the name of that guy who bought a yacht. I did some work in an office next door to him, actually. Who was he called? He was called the big, was his nickname, the guy that did that big fraud? The Whale. Was he called the Whale or something? I just remember his nickname. I don't remember his name, but I literally did some work in the office next door to him when I was in KL. So quite interesting. But I think you should be aware of what's going on and, you know, governance, how things are done, how contracts are awarded. There's all kinds of a bit controversy at the moment in COVID. You know, COVID, be aware of how it's important that government contracts are awarded so they can be scrutinized. Hey, I think we've had a great session there. I think if you take my advice on board, and please, the worst thing you can do is not write anything in your exam answer. Okay, if you write nothing, you get no marks. If you write something, you do get marks. If you don't write enough, you don't pass and you get 42, 43. So to make sure you write enough, you need to have strict time management of your tasks and make sure you only allocate the appropriate time to each task. If you do that, you've got a really good chance. If you've got no awareness of time management, expose yourself to it and you'll think, wow, I didn't realize, because then next time you will make sure you do more. Okay. I think we've had an awful lot of questions there. Fantastic. That's what I'm here for. Use your time wisely over the next 7 days. Use your brain in an effective way, which means you need to give it breaks. You need to exercise to give it some endorphins, which means you need to give it a cool down, which might come from something like mindfulness. You might think, what's that to do? I need to learn about governance. No, you don't. Your brain needs to be, they call it neural plasticity, and your brain needs to be in good condition so it can absorb information and that information can be retrieved from it. Imagine running 3 marathons the day before you're running the actual marathon. You wouldn't be in good condition. Okay, so it's really important to look after your brain over the next 7 days, and the advice I've given will help that happen. Yep, you need to be cool on the day. You need to not panic. You need to maybe look at a little bit of mindfulness and look at the ACCA mental health awareness information pages to help you develop strategies if you do panic. If you do all of that, you're going to be fantastic. And for some of you, you're never going to have to do exams again. Always focus on that. Think, look, in 7 days, for some of us, exams are over, gone. Yep. So I need to make sure these next 7 days count. Okay. So thank you for listening. Thank you for all your great questions. I wish you all the best. You don't really need any of my luck if you're following the advice I've given to you. Yep. It's really important we pass this exam. We've got 7 days to make a difference. The other thing, when you are feeling a bit low, is focus on the prize. Remember what the prize is in your head, and you will be absolutely on the money. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day. Keep focused. Look after yourself. Look after your brain. That's what's important. And don't listen to people who tell you question 2 is going to be on governance and question 3 is going to be on IT. The exam changes every time. So thank you, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sean, for conducting today's sessions, and also all of you for attendance. Hopefully you have gained more insights in actually preparing for your SBL exam in next week. For your informations, the recording for these sessions will be available within these few days. So do subscribe to our YouTube channel, My Learning ACCA, and stay tuned for the updates. I will include our channel name in the chat box for reference right now.
Okay, I'll have a look at that myself as well. That's a
Alright.
Malaysia channel, or is it?
It's our learning support channel.
Just for Malaysia or for everyone?
This one actually is open up for everyone. If let's say they feel that the content is actually suitable for them, they can actually view that as well.
Okay, great. I'll have a look.
Okay. So last but not least, I would like to take this opportunity to wish all the March sessions exam takers all the best, and please continue to stay safe and well during this pandemic. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good luck.